Longlegs is a brand new psychological horror film written and directed by Osgood Perkins, and it stars Micah Monroe and Nicolas Cage. This is a film that I've had my eye on for a little bit now, but I went into it completely blind. That's what I love doing these days. I don't really watch trailers. I just read the brief synopsis for a movie online when I'm purchasing the tickets, and then I go in with as minimal information as humanly possible. But I went and saw the earliest possible showing that I could in my state, and I have a lot of thoughts that I want to share with you. So I'm going to get into the review. It will be spoiler free, but before we do that, hit that subscribe button. I talk about and review movies and TV shows on this channel all the time, but I also talk about video games. But anyway, let's talk about Longlegs. I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of the film here. I'm not going to spoil anything once again, but I may or may not reveal more information than what was in the trailer. Again, I didn't watch the trailer, but I will keep my synopsis short. Micah Monroe stars as a character named Lee Harker, who's a relatively new FBI agent, and she's tasked with figuring out who a serial killer is. A serial killer that refers to themselves as Longlegs. And as she gets closer and closer to unraveling this mystery, she realizes that it starts to hit a little too close to home for her. But what makes this movie possibly a bit more unique than a lot of other films and stories in the same genre is that Lee as a character has what a lot of people refer to as a somewhat of psychic powers, a psychic ability thing going on, where she has a habit of knowing details before they become apparent. And I loved everything about this movie in a technical sense, from the direction to the visuals to the soundtrack. As soon as this movie started, I knew that the tone and the atmosphere was exactly what I want in a film like this. It feels authentic. It feels old school. In a lot of ways, it feels like a movie not of this time. And don't get me wrong, I love blockbusters. I love MCU movies. I'm there day one for every new Blumhouse horror movie, but I love seeing movies like this because it just reminds me that there's still some originality in Hollywood. There's still some uniqueness in the films that they're giving us today. The performances are all great. Of course, Micah Monroe is the main character, and she gives probably her best performance, but Nicolas Cage is in this movie. Like I said, I don't really want to talk about his role. I don't want to talk a lot about his character because I think it's best if you just discover all of that for yourself. But Nicolas Cage has a habit these days of just giving the most outlandish, crazy performances, and his performance in this film is outlandish and crazy in all of the best ways, but it feels more real. Sometimes Nicolas Cage has a habit of feeling like a caricature, like he's making fun of himself, like, you know, he's like a funny clown kind of thing, and we're all laughing with him and sometimes at him. But Nicolas Cage in this movie, his craziness just feels, again, authentic. It feels like it belongs in this narrative, in this film. Again, I won't get into super specific details about the narrative and the plot, but I really, really liked it. I'm a sucker for the old school serial killer versus detective style stories, and this is definitely one of the better ones, especially in recent years. It does that thing where we aren't necessarily trying to solve the case alongside of the detective. We actually know a lot more than the detective does in a lot of aspects of the narrative, but in a lot of other parts of the story, we're left in the dark. And again, we're not really trying to solve who the killer is. We're not really trying to figure out the end goal of the plot. We're more or less just trying to fill in the gaps to see the bigger picture. But Longlegs is not a perfect film in my opinion. I do have some critiques with the film. I do think that after the 30-minute or possibly the 40-minute mark of this film, it does start to have a lot of noticeable pacing issues. I love a slow burn, and this film is definitely a slow burn, and it's a very effective one at that, but there comes a certain point in this movie where every scene starts to drag just a little too long. Every conversation that happens between characters seems to be a little too long, and it's not as enthralling as it should be to be super compelling. And the way that the narrative plays out, again, no spoilers here, but I wasn't the biggest fan of it. It came across a lot like a deep breath that didn't have time to fully exhale. It left me wanting a little bit more. I still highly, highly, highly recommend this movie, especially if you're a fan of art house style horror movies. But a lot of movies these days can be described as greater than the sum of their parts. But I actually think that Longlegs is one of those rare instances where the movie itself isn't as good as it should have been, especially seeing how strong each individual component is. Again, that's not me hating on the movie or saying that you shouldn't see it, because all of those individual aspects are phenomenal. Again, I loved the direction, the soundtrack was great. Some of the best performances in a horror movie this year to date. And it's definitely one of those movies that I can tell is going to be a lot better on a rewatch. But with that being said, it had all of the elements, all of the ingredients to be a 9 or a 10 out of 10, but come the end of the day, come the time the credits rolled, it didn't really reach that praise, at least not for me. But anyway, that's my quick and brief thoughts after seeing Longlegs. Have you seen it yet? If you have, let me know what you've thought about it in the comments, and if you haven't, let me know. Do you plan to, or are you going to ignore it completely? Either way, I look forward to hearing from you in the comments. Once again, consider subscribing if you haven't already, and thank you for watching, especially if you watched this far.